from 17 once again. This is a Mirror's Edge walkthrough, and it's being played on the PC on normal difficulty. So usually, guys, I would do hardest difficulty, I would do some kind of challenge run, I would do some kind of modifier or deviation from the norm, and we're not going to be doing that on this one. I'll explain in this format exactly why that is, but for the initial introduction, this is going to be a kind of an appreciation run of a game that got kind of a hard reception when it came out for several reasons, some justified, some not so. And this game happens to have one of my all-time favourite colour palettes for just general visual aesthetics. So I'm going to be coming in and talking about just all of the interesting tweaks and minutiae of presentation, architecture, concept, design, and just really going in here and coming back to a game that I touched back in 2008 when it came out, and I didn't really get on with it as much as I would have liked to have. So now is an opportunity to come back now, look back a little bit, and see where we stand all these years later, after the sequel, and after just how video games have changed and how they've kind of got to a point now they're a little bit tired and run down, and this was a nice beacon of creativity back at a time when first-person shooters were all brown and very much run down. So the run is going to be an hour and 42 minutes, so get comfortable, put your feet up, and let's run through this interesting dystopian or utopian future, depending on your perspective. And be very careful on that vent just there as you fall down. If you don't do the command roll as you land, you will take a hard fall, which is a really, really slow fall that looks like it injures you. But if you roll directly forward, you'll go immediately into those soldiers and they'll annihilate you. So you kind of want to angle the camera to the side and then land in the roll if you can, and it will enable you to get out of there without being shot. When I first came to this game, I have this interesting fascination with Mirror's Edge because I want to love it. I want to enjoy playing it as much as I enjoy the idea of playing it. And this might sound really strange when you watch this, because the walkthrough is hopefully going to be interesting and entertaining for people. I don't think it's going to help anybody get through the game, because I don't know if there's that many people coming back to Mirror's Edge as we come to the first piece of combat. And we're certainly going to talk about the combat, just not in this particular encounter. What I will say, though, for the purposes of the walkthrough, is it's generally always better to go up to the enemy and disarm them, instead of doing the standard combat, because later on when the guards get much more durable and defensive, beating them up is just a terrible idea unless you've got some kind of, epic strats. So disarm and then go forth and conquer. But the reason that we're on normal here, guys, is as we do the tutorial and jump towards a helicopter, which will put us into the first chapter after the transition here. And then the game begins as it should. I will not be doing the tutorial, as you might have noticed, there's no real need for it. And the move you just saw just then, before I go into this explanation, is really important. If you ever see me look to the right, guys, and then flick back forward, I'm doing a technique that is known as, it's a side jump into getting full momentum, or close to maximum speed. So in this game, Faith takes a couple of seconds when she runs on a straight in order to build up enough momentum to carry her speed to the highest it can go. And that build-up time can be completely skipped by jumping sideways and then turning the camera at the end of the jump and holding forward, and you will carry all the momentum of the side jump and immediately go into moving at the close to maximum speed without any kind of manipulations. So it's a really, really handy piece of tech to immediately start off at the speed that you want to be at, instead of just running and feeling slow and then eventually getting where you need to go. As we move through this beautifully decorated lime, white, grey and black environment with the concrete here, just a fantastic vision into the design of this game, and a lot of the things you're going to be seeing here as this motif is repeated quite a few times with some really bold colours. And at a time when this game came out, colour was not as frequent as it is now with a lot of the designs that we're getting. So this was just I'd never seen anything like it, and I do think that when you first see this game, it leaves such a striking impression in the player, and I do think that it leaves an even greater impression than its sequel does, because Catalyst is a beautiful game. It has a whole host of different technology, but they changed engine, and I think they moved that visual direction to a place which was a logical upgrade and evolution, but I don't think it was anywhere near as just brutally striking as the contrast here between the whites and those popping colours. And those colours are one of the things that dictated this walkthrough being on normal. Because if you play on hard difficulty, it gets rid of runner's vision. And runner's vision is a tool that changes the colour of certain pieces of the geometry, like the door here being red. You see the door red? That kind of highlight disappears when you play on hard, and that was one of the things I wanted to maintain because I think it helps the aesthetic of the game. This is weird too. If you play at high frame rate here, you can't move on this. So you might notice, Chris, why aren't you moving to the side to make that jump easier? You literally can't move on that horizontally unless you cap the frame rate. And I'm playing this game at 200 FPS, and I don't want to cap the frame rate, so there's some real weird oddities that are going to turn up and happen every so often. And I'm definitely going to be discussing those because they make the game, which at times can be spotty and questionable on detection, that leads to some incredibly frustrating moments, even more spotty and questionable. And it's something that I have to discuss because it's such a shame that it exists. The game was in no way future-proofed at all for hardware that would come later down the line. And it's just a royal shame because why wouldn't you want your game to look and run and play way better when better technology is available? I'll never personally understand it. But that was the first reason why I wasn't too bummed about not going immediately onto hard. Because hard difficulty, as I say, it gets rid of the runner's vision, getting rid of all the reds, and it also makes it so that the enemies are much more dangerous. But the combat in this game is so fucking miserable, I didn't really care that much that we weren't showcasing too much of that, because I'm going to do my best to avoid the combat at all cases. And I'm going to disarm people, and I'm going to shoot the people that are directly in front of me, but if there's an opportunity to just run past it, I'm probably going to hit that up instead of, you know, going down on my sword for the sake of the very bizarre and questionable combat engine of Mirror's Edge. The second reason why I wasn't too choked up about not doing it on hard was purely based off the fact that you have to beat the game to unlock it, and I couldn't go into the config and just unlock it from the default settings. And I don't think I had it in me to play this game twice. I really don't, as much as I do think that this is a wonderful game in so many ways, and I think there's aspects of it that really stand out and make me adore it. But to me, when I start playing the game, the luster kinda starts to drip feed away gradually, and by the end of it, I find it to be an incredibly frustrating experience, as much as there's so much to love and there's so many cool things. So I didn't want to play it twice to unlock it and then do it, and it leads us to what this is, which is, I'm going to call it a walkthrough, I'm going to call it an appreciation run. That right there is interesting, mentioning the detection. There's times when you attack the door and it just does not trigger what it's supposed to trigger, so Faith will just flail, and it can get you killed and it can lose your time. And if you're a speedrunner, which if you've never seen the speedruns for these games, guys, I absolutely recommend them. Because not only are they phenomenal in every conceivable way, technical, fascinating, just ridiculous to watch, but they're also taking a game that does not work anywhere near as well as it should, and they're just embracing its flaws, they're learning to adapt to them, and they're coming out on top with a level of execution and mastery that is really respectable for how frustrating this game can be to do a basic thing in it. And I just think it shows just how much time they've put into it and how much they love it to get to that level of quality. And I can't recommend them highly enough. The reason this walkthrough came about is because YouTube accidentally auto-played a Mirror's Edge speedrun, and it reminded me of, oh wow, yeah, Mirror's, look at this corridor, guys. Look how beautiful the lighting is on that corridor, that pink subway sequence, as we move now into this orange plaza that takes us up onto the railway side here. It's just phenomenal. The colour work in this game, it just makes me smile. And, you know, some of the textures look a bit rough and some of the graphics aren't quite where they could be. This game came out in 2008, I think. That's a long time ago now, and they were really just going their own way. And they get a lot of respect for that, because this was one of the first times that I truly saw that EA could take a risk. And I think it paid off for me personally. I don't know how well it paid off for them. I know that this game is very divisive in its lovers and its haters. As we come over here and we jump forward and we trigger a sequence here that takes us to the next level. As we break through the roof there. And this is going to be taking us underground and into a sequence that, when I was first recording, I thought that I was going to do a hitless run of this game. I wanted to do something different because it was going to be on normal. I wanted to try and spice it up and make it a bit more interesting. And I'd forgotten at that point just how frustrating the shooting was in this game. For some strange reason, they just couldn't commit to this idea of mobility and parkour and just letting the player run around the environments and do environmental puzzles and this wonderful, racing game line of mastery and execution. So instead, at almost every waking moment, they spawn enemies to shoot at you from a range where you can't do anything about it other than just run. And I do think Mirror's Edge works best when you are simply running because it's what it's designed to be. But it would have been really nice if they could have come up with more interesting ways of getting across the idea that perhaps you should move than a bunch of hit-scan, arsehole, fucking god-aim, aimbotting robots. And this sequence here, it took me like 7 attempts, because I didn't even know if you could do it. This was the part where I was like, can you actually do this game without being hit? And it turns out, yes you can. You can do the whole game without getting hit, but you're going to have to restart a whole bunch. Because these moments, sometimes you just get shot. Sometimes no one can hit you. Sometimes you've got complete plot armor. And I did that sequence without taking damage, and I thought, this could be really, really fun. Turns out, no. It's not fun to do it like that. So I dropped it really quickly. And there is a no damage run on YouTube. A guy did it on hard, which I think is really, really interesting. So if you want to check that out, feel free to do so. If you search, it's one of the first results that come up. And I think it's kind of cool that guy did that, because it shows that he really, really loves the game. And I love the game, but I don't like it at times, especially when it comes to playing it for large periods of time, because it brings a demon out of me. And it's one of those really funny things, because when Mirror's Edge is working, which you'll notice from your own footage or your own playtime with it, when you watch this game and everything's happening and you're doing the jumps correctly and you're timing everything and you're spacing it all and you're keeping momentum, it looks like a work of art. It looks like poetry, doesn't it? It's such a fascinating game to watch. But when it doesn't work, there's nothing more frustrating than telling a game to do something and the game ignoring what you say and doing something fucking stupid. Like, there are few things in video games that irk me that much, and that's one of the reasons why me and this game just don't get on. Even though I want to, and I come back every so often to check it out, just to remember, was it really as finicky as I thought it was at the time, or was I just bad and I didn't have the execution? Because I think that's an interesting thing worth discussing, that. People say stuff, don't they, about Mario. Super Mario 64. How does anybody do what they do in those speedruns? That game controls so badly. That controller's so crap. All these weird things, and it's weird to me because I grew up on Super Mario 64 and I thought that game controlled amazingly, and for the time it did. It's only now that you look back with contrast that you see the flaws of the N64 and you see the flaws of what happens in those games, but that's the beautiful thing about the people that love them and want to play them. It doesn't matter how awkward the controls are, it doesn't matter how different and how against the norm and non-standardized anything is, because those players put so much time into completely understanding and controlling those systems that they master them. And I think that's something that's so powerful from a player perspective and from a conceptual perspective, because it showcases that your game does not have to have the best controls. It does not have to be a trailblazer or a frontier setter when it comes to how you control the game. You just have to give a general idea of consistency so that people can learn it, and they will still do incredible things just by sheer dedication. And that's the kind of stuff that's really, really cool about design. Because how many times have you heard people say things like, Resident Evil 4 is a great game, but it controls like shit? You've probably heard it a few times. I hear it quite a lot. Resident Evil 4 controls in a very archaic and draconian sense, because that's what it was. It was coming from a very old school method of controlling, and they were trying to innovate with newer concepts, and that was the hybrid and the emergent evolution that happened. You can't expect that game to control like a game right now, because games have gone through so many iterations. Everything's standardized, everything's smoother, everything's easier and more accessible, Games were different then. But you hear it a lot. Like things like Ninja Gaiden, when people talk about the camera in Ninja Gaiden or the movement, and how it's just tricky and it's awkward and it's not great, when in reality, if you put the time in, you can do amazing things with it because you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to manipulate a system that isn't always obvious what you should do in that moment. And as much as that is a failure of design and a bit of a downside for the game in general to the casual audience, to that hardcore demographic, they will just learn what to do and what not to do to avoid all of these tripwires and these landmines that make the movement and the systems not play so well together. And that's one of the really cool things about watching this game. For instance, guys, if you watch this walkthrough of mine and you listen and you go on this journey with me, thank you. It's nice to have you here. But afterwards, go check out a speedrun. Go see how they move. You won't see them doing the crappy landings. You won't see them, you know, getting caught on stuff as much. You'll see them doing just a ballet of practiced, absolutely choreographed, and just completely curated mastery of a game that at times fights you tooth and nail to get out a wall run, you know, to get out a jump, to grab a ledge. And I've edited around some of this, guys. I don't want this to come across as, this is not meant to be a showcase of mastery, this is not a speedrun, this is a segmented walkthrough that's meant to appreciate just the wonderful visuals of this game and enable me to talk about games at the late 2000s before my channel and kind of talk about the EA taking a risk in Mirror's Edge and its architecture and its concepts and whatnot. This is not meant to be a hugely impressive showcase of my big Mirror's Edge dick, because I simply don't have one. I'm not good enough, I don't have an interest in putting in the time, and as I mentioned, I get too frustrated with the game to want to go in there and do the perfect run. 10 years ago, when the game first came out, I did go for some of the time trials and whatnot, and I did try to get a bit better at that on console, and I did have some fun with that. I did beat hard mode on the original game. I've got the achievement from, you know, 10 plus years ago. I definitely gave the game a go, but I remember coming away from it very frustrated, and all of that frustration is still there. And it's funny because Catalyst came out, and I do think Catalyst did a really, really good thing. It made a lot of those issues that I hated a lot easier to navigate, and they made it so that you didn't have to be so good at the game, and it didn't have to be so punishing, and it was much more accessible for a wider market. And it's interesting that, because I would imagine that the super hardcore guys that love Mirror's Edge, those people probably thought it was a little bit disappointing because they'd learned how to deal with the systems and they got really good, and it was very skillful to do so and very difficult because the game is such a particular game. Like, even grabbing a pipe sometimes in this game simply refuses to work. Sometimes Faith just does not grab things, and in a platformer, when you don't grab things, it's the ultimate sin. So watching people that know how to navigate all this because they've learned what to do and what not to do is superb, right? Well, in the sequel, all of that stuff works as intended a lot better, and there's way fewer instances of moments of things just not really going as they used to. But maybe that's the kind of detail that the experienced and the really passionate player of the first game dislikes about the new game. Or the sequel, I should say, 'cause it's not new anymore, it's like 6 years old, isn't it? But this is the first piece of combat where I realised that, yeah, this is shit. I'm really not having a good time. And I can't even begin to tell you guys just how sus and questionable this port is in so many ways. Considering that DICE are a company that have done PC shooters, there's almost no reason for this game to feel as terrible as it does in almost every conceivable way. It's a bit of a joke, really. And this sequence here, my idea was kill a few of the first guys, and then when there's only one or two of them, they'll chase me, so I'll run all the way around this circle, and then I'll jump on these trucks, and I'll jump across the wire fence. It didn't work, though, because the detection over here is kind of shitty, so I couldn't climb anything, and by the time I'd finished fucking about, they were on me immediately, and I had to fight them anyway, I think, or they shot me or something. So the whole thing was a bit of a sham. But you can grab on here, and you can jump over this fence, and one of the interesting mechanics in this game that's not really explained and the speedrunners will learn to use quite successfully is barbed wire hurts you unless you use the coil technique. So if you jump and coil in the air, if you land on barbed wire, you can jump off it without taking damage, and you can do a lot of things you're not intended to do, and it leads to some wonderful sequences, especially in the speedruns. This is me just taking out my frustration on this sequence, just because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all, and it shouldn't exist. The combat in this game is a real eyesore compared to everything else, and the longer you play, the more the game kind of deteriorates and breaks down into these combat sequences, and I just wish that they'd had the confidence and the boldness to commit to the navigation and the puzzle solving and the platforming. Because if you think about it, guys, what Mirror's Edge does really strongly for a player like myself is when it is just being a platformer, just being traversal, just being navigational, it uses its world and its colour palette to make it interesting. And I think this is the greatest compliment that you can give to this game that not a lot of people seem to notice or appreciate. There are so many games that will use some gimmicky, you know, really awkward, out of the blue sequence to mix up their gameplay, to kind of get away from the fact that you're doing the same thing. So they'll throw it in there to confuse you and to keep you mixed up on your toes. I love the blue here. The blue there contrasting and then the orange highlights in the background. Guys, if you were ever to study colour theory, this game is like a wonderful, you know, primary colour kind of colour theory lecture. It's just, there's so many aspects of design that you can learn from this game's presentation, and it just looks phenomenal. But they'll throw in all kinds of gimmicky moments, and that's how they keep you from getting bored and from realizing that you're doing the same thing. Well, Mirror's Edge doesn't do that. Mirror's Edge instead, it kind of false faces you with this wonderful aesthetic, with this crazy eye for design and this interesting, you know, scientific, futuristic, urban landscape. And I think that that's something that we're seeing a lot more of now. Like, look at that contrast from that shocking orange wall. We come in here and we've got the lines, this wonderful blue, this electric blue, this crazy, you know, this slick cobalt colour coming through here. And then we come back into another sequence of some lighter blues with more orange motifs, and then the red just shining through as this beacon of, come here, grab me, you might have a good time. But think about all the games where you just walking simulators, and the rise of walking simulators and immersion and immersive sims and all these kind of first-person storytelling told that have unique stories, and they have you navigating through areas that resonate with... Watch this, by the way. This is collision, complete collision. I was on that beam there for about 5 minutes just getting absolutely frustrated and furious that that could exist in a game that's meant to be about speed and fluidity and freedom of movement. And then there's a ramp to your right, and if you run towards it, there's an invisible fucking wall. And I'm going to talk about what that is, because it's not just the game being kind of shitty. It's the game being shitty at high frame rates and some of the things that happens and makes it even worse, which we're going to get to. And be careful on some of these jumps. I went for some crazy ambitious jumps here. There are techniques to make a lot of these jumps if you know what you're doing, but they involve manipulations that get you extra speed, and I'm not going to be doing a lot of that stuff because I only know a little bit about it. I don't know it enough to make it consistent. So instead I'm just going to be kind of trying to find my own paths, and hopefully they're kind of speedy, and hopefully they're enjoyable to watch. Just be careful over here, guys. Sometimes when you do this jump, you'll grab... you won't grab anything and you'll get stuck in midair, and Faith will never land. You can... It's not necessarily a soft lock, because if you wiggle around, the physics will make you land eventually, but she just refuses to grab things, and it gets really awkward. But keep on pushing forward and doing what you can, and keeping that speed, and just having a good time with the joys of movement. But all these games have used the environment to help tell the story and to help keep the player engaged while the story is happening around them. And I think that this was one of the glowing examples for me of games doing that in a medium that I enjoyed a lot more because it wasn't slow. But at the same time, I loved looking at everything, and I felt like just the visuals themselves really showcased to me what the game was and why it was so special. But I whiffed on the door just then to show you how finicky the detection on the doors can be. And I did touch on this briefly, but I didn't really go fully into it, so I'll do that now. There are many instances in this game, guys, where I've gone to do something to like touch a door, to grab a ledge, do any kind of standard basic mirror. Look at the collision on this pipe, like fuck me. Just standard Mirror's Edge things, and Faith has just not done it. Faith has like just got stuck on something, grabbed the wrong thing, just refused to do what the game is meant to do, and I've edited around it to make it a bit more enjoyable to watch and a bit more streamlined in some of those cases. I was tempted to leave them all in so it would give me an opportunity to express to you guys what I mean when I say that when this game is working it can be a piece of art, but when it stops working and weird things start happening, it can be one of the most frustrating experiences you'll ever have. but I didn't want this whole video to be me talking about why Mirror's Edge doesn't work and why Mirror's Edge is so close to being this wonderful proof of concept, but ultimately it kind of fails outside of a very niche community of people willing to overlook the problems, because the game, once you get it at that level and once you practice it enough to know what not to do, it can be a lot more satisfying. This sequence here, you have to break the glass, and shooting it with the gun is a good way to do that. You can kick it, you can break it traditionally and save the gun for later on. One of the fastest ways to open a door is to actually shoot it, and I do try to do that in this sequence, but I mess it up. Because interacting with the doors is actually quite fascinating, and whenever you go to a door, you get like a vacuum that happens when you hit it, and depending on what you do to the door depends on the speed of the opening and the access. So if you do the standard punch that Faith does where she shoulder barges it, you're in an animation there and it kind of locks you in and you can't do much with it, and it's quite slow in the grand scheme of things. The kick that I just did then is pretty fast, but once again you're not moving, there's no forward momentum on it, so it is quite slow if you're trying to do it really quickly. The best way to open doors is to jump kick them or to slide kick them. Those two sequences, if you do them correctly and you time them right, you can generally kick them open and get through the doors in an expedient fashion, and it's the way you're going to see me try to always approach the doors. And when you move too, if you move in a straight line, jumping is actually faster than just simply running straight forward. I'm going to do a mixture of both, because it's one of those things where it's so easy to lose momentum in this game. It kind of goes against the central tenet of the whole game, but it does also increase the skill ceiling and make it so that a good player and a great player are separated by the small things, and it raises that skill ceiling. But we're going to be running towards the wire here, and we've got another dash of that super bright blue, that like deep but electric blue, with the oranges, the cranes in the background. And this game does a really good job of showing you the horizon and giving you just enough visual information to tell your eye exactly what's expected of you and where to go. And I think that when the game first came out, I think there was a lot of players that didn't have that visual language of games to the right amount to realise that that wasn't just an artistic expression, that wasn't just a bit of flair and meant to be, you know, graphical fidelity. It was actually a waypoint and a tool to help you navigate. So there were a lot of people that found the game super frustrating and super difficult. You'll notice if you search online for Mirror's Edge, they mention how hard it is. And the reason for that is simple. They give you a very basic tutorial that doesn't convey just how much you need to know and all the information that goes behind half the mechanics they expect you to use. And then at the very beginning of the game, they expect you to use everything. And then later on, you're using the exact same things you're using at the start. And what this does is fantastic for the returning player, because it enables them to use advanced strategies and advanced techniques from the very beginning. However, if you don't have that mindset and you haven't cut your teeth with the game, you don't look at it like that. You look at it as this incredibly overwhelming and frustrating experience of all of these wonderful things that you haven't quite grasped being demanded of you at almost all times. And you notice in a lot of games, like look at Doom Eternal. In Doom Eternal you start out very basic, and then by the end of the game you're a one-man hell-wrecking machine with all this capability that you simply didn't have at the start. The problem with Doom Eternal is when you go back and play that game from a fresh save, you feel like an invalid when you first start playing. It takes like 5 levels to get to where you want to be, and that's frustrating. It's not good progression. It's great progression on a single playthrough, but horrible progression on a repeated playthrough, unless you like the improvement of the power fantasy building. Whereas Mirror's Edge's progression is objectively better, because you start the game just as capable as you end the game. The only distinction is your capability of using the toolset. And it's another one of those things where DICE took a big risk with this. They took a huge risk at giving you everything at the start, and then trying to utilize level design that made you do that. Most games do not do this because it's too overwhelming for a player. It's too intimidating. But they did. And that is one of the reasons why the people that love this game, they really love it. Because they were the people that stuck with it, they got through the frustrations, and then they came back, and they showed just how good it can be. We're surrounded here, though, with some shades of blue, as I take a big fall there, one of the slow falls. So I should probably talk about the basic mechanics that I've kind of skirted through in this introductory period as we climb the ladder and go across the walking beam. If you wonder about this beam here, guys, if you ever see me stand still and not look like I'm moving it, I don't know if this is a mouse and keyboard thing or a PC thing, but when I play this on high frame rates and I get on those beams, the game just doesn't listen. If you hold forward on those beams and you try to press AD while holding forwards, you just fall off and you die. And you can't just commit to it and do it really quickly and just run across it holding W and get to the other side, because you just die. So it gets super fiddly, and I found a way to alleviate it without lowering the frame rate, so that's what I did. Ooh, nice jump kick. Jump kicking and slide kicking do more damage than standard attacks, so if you're going to engage with the soldiers in the game, even though I don't recommend that you do, you want to do those moves. However, disarming is much better. That said, sometimes disarming can be a huge pain in the ass, because later on you have to do it at a really weird odd timing and quite a small window, and if you fail you die, because the guys are so capable. And then right here, if you go and kill the people shooting at you, you can do this without the risk of being shot at. And if I were doing the hitless version of this run, I would have done that, but I just get on the crane and get out of dodge. But if you played Mirror's Edge Catalyst, you'll know a lot of the moves that were in this game, and you'll see how they were embellished upon and how they were improved. But in this one, when you land, you can press the low button, and you'll do a commando roll, which will get rid of some of the damage from the falls. Like just then, if I'd have held the roll just then, I would have been able to stop that from happening. And then when you're jumping, if you want to get a little bit of extra height to enable you to get over something, be it quite a high fence, what I did just then is known as the coil, where Faith raises her legs up into the air. So you have the roll, you have the coil, you have the slide that you can do, which can sometimes low profile things, even though a lot of the times when you try and low profile things, you don't have the distance that you need to get under them, so you end up just kind of awkwardly crawling. And then you have the wall run ability, so you can run on walls, and then you can jump off them. You can also turn your perspective while you're running on walls, jump off them, and then do that a few times and chain it, much like in Mario, where you can do the wall jumps. And that is a decent strategy, but it's very particular. And if you've played any platformers before this game, bringing in the knowledge of those platformers is going to hurt you when you play Mirror's Edge. And I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't get along with the game all that much to begin with. Because I came from Prince of Persia, and Prince of Persia at that point was so masterful and so finessed. They'd had 3 games to make the game as smooth and as functional as it possibly could be. So wall running in Prince of Persia, ledge grabbing, everything you did in that game was very fast, very responsive, and I was very good at it because I'd put the time in, you know. So when I came to Mirror's Edge, a lot of the wall running didn't make sense to me because it felt super limited. It felt like she just didn't do it right. You know, a lot of the mantling. You'll notice that some of the mantles that you do in this game are incredibly slow. And they're essentially a punishment because you didn't angle the character correctly and the camera to get a better mantle. And depending on where you look when you mantle, depends on how quickly you do it. And there are faster mantles than others. You'll notice too sometimes when you jump towards a building, sometimes Faith will put her hand down and she'll just like kind of walk up it or step up it, and it's really quick, right? If you could do that to everything or not even touch it at all and just run on it, would be superb. But it's difficult to do that. And then when she does grab things, there's about 3 or 4 animations of grabbing things. Like that was a fast one just then. Put both her hands down and just springboarded herself up as I accidentally missed my jump. See if we get a good one here. That time she touched it, didn't she? That was an extra fast one. She didn't use both her arms just then. So that's kind of cool. But there's all these different ways of doing things. That was a mixture of the two, wasn't it? A little bit slower, but not quite too slow compared to some of the big ones. And all of this is happening very quickly, and you might not even be seeing it, but you need to because it's very important, and it's telling you what you're doing right, and it's telling you what you're doing wrong. And it's subtle in its teaching, but it's the type of stuff that the speedrunners have learned and understand, you know. And it leads you to the biggest frustration I think Mirror's Edge has, which is all of the designed mechanics, all of the things that they're telling you to do. I'm going the wrong way here. There's a valve behind me that turns off the steam. It's just up there. But all of the stuff they want you to do, all the parkour moves, all of the tools that make the game something to interact with and give the player agency, slow you down. And it doesn't gel with the design. The game is meant to be about momentum. It's meant to be about speed and freedom and being this parkour runner. Yet, if you drop and you do that roll, you lose momentum at the end of the roll. And it doesn't make any sense. So if you want to go fast on this game, guys, you never want to use that roll, because it's too slow. And it doesn't make sense. Like, look at the stairs here. The stairs are technically a slope. So if you jump, you go faster upstairs. So mashing jump upstairs is faster than running upstairs. This is the first boss of the game as well. This guy's a wrestler. And apparently you can just mash the button here. I didn't know that, but I actually tapped it when it glowed red. And if you're playing on the harder difficulty, it won't glow red. So there's a little bit of a timing to it, which is kind of cool, the idea of it. But you don't have to do it. You can just mash the button and you'll be completely safe. And there goes the first boss.
Better talk fast.
But it's just bizarre to me that, like, that move there, see what I just did? See how it stops me completely? I'm running into a door and I'm punching it, and it freezes you. Why? Does that not go against the whole ethos of the game? And it's almost like, oh, by the way, you don't have to do any of this. You can actually just jump to the left, go in the elevator, and climb up as the men are coming out. They will not shoot you. I noticed that coming back when I had to do some re-recordings, but at this time I drop down, I disarm one guy and I shoot him with a shotgun, and then we're going to do some messing around with the elevators. But one of the disconnects for me when I first played was I couldn't understand why everything felt so slow. And it feels so slow because it's meant to be meticulous. It's meant to be precise. And if you don't do things very correctly, which is horrible English, if you don't do things correctly, the game does punish you for speed. It slows you down. And it's a double-sided sword, this, because on the long tail, it's really good. It teaches a disciplined player. Look at this teal here as well. The white, the contrasting of the red door, this kind of sterile, you know, the cleanliness yet with the gritty concretes, and just these awesome greens. I've seen plenty of greens in the game, but nothing to this shade, and it gives this wonderful cold feeling. So cool. I love this aesthetic. But for the dedicated player, it punishes them to the point of them never ever doing the wrong choice. Always trying to seek the right choice, and every so often the game doesn't quite nail it because the detection's kind of a bit wobbly. But mostly, you get what you ask for, you get what you do. Whereas the lesser skilled players, unfortunately, they suffer because the initial experience feels way worse than it needed to feel. And I was climbing around on these boards here, but you don't have to do any of this. Do you see that then? That was a slow mantle, that one. And I do wonder, would the game have been better if they'd have come up with a skillful, like, skill check for mantling? So the moment you touch a ledge, depending on how late you are to pressing the button, or perhaps a certain part of the animation, if you pressed it, you got a faster interaction, a faster mantle. So mantling became a skill rather than all completely indicative of where you're looking when you hit the wall. And unfortunately, I can't quite remember the additional improvements that Catalyst made because it's been too long since I played it. But it did streamline a lot of things. It changed a lot of things. It changed the engine, which I think was a huge thing. It went from Unreal to Frostbite, and I love the Frostbite engine, but I think this game, there's something about this game. It almost seems like a maquette. It looks like this super clinical model. The whole game seems kind of based around the idea of those... You know when you see in movies those executive CEOs in their offices, and it's always some kind of terrible tyrant who's trying to take over some poor, you know, like, unfortunate neighborhood or suburb, and he wants to build a theme park or some kind of crazy thing. The game's been really weird right now, and I'm getting really mad. Did I mention that the mouse in this game is the worst mouse I've ever felt? I might not have mentioned that. I probably should. I can't even begin to tell you how horrible this feels. It's like you're shaking hands with a cat who hates you. It's just terrifying. I really do not like how the mouse feels. It's just weird. It's super high sense, it's super fiddly, it's horrible. But you know what I mean, guys, in movies, where the evil CEO has this plans for this wonderful industrial estate in the middle of some Care Bears account, and it looks like it's been made out of white plastic. It's all sharp lines, it's all very phallic symbols, very powerful, very manly, you know, very dominant, very aggressive, like an emperor conquering. And this whole game kind of has that. And then every so often, you come to these areas of texture, don't you? These areas where there's a grittiness, there's more of a realistic surface on it, to show you that the dirtier underbelly of the city has got some character, it's got some shades, it's got some deviations, because the storyline in this game, I don't remember it at all, but I remember the general idea, and the general idea is, you know, big bad totalitarian company is wanting to, you know, censor and whitewash everything rather literally, and then you guys are on the fringe of this society doing this clandestine work to kind of undercut it. You are the rebellion, right? You know, you are fighting against whatever you're fighting against, and then it turns into a sister plot, doesn't it? Somebody gets kidnapped, blah blah blah. But the idea is that your character is this drone in the hive, in this completely automated hive where there's no creative expression or freedom, and you express freedom by being these couriers. Or something of that ilk. I'm sure I'll get that one guy that's, you know, super into the story that's like, no, you're completely wrong, you see it's this and this and this, and that's fine, dude, I don't fucking care. But the idea is, it's meant to show this oppressive white, isn't it? The whole city is white. It is all very sterile, it is all very prescribed. It is this clinical society that walks in this one line, and everybody walks the same. It's 1984, whatever you want to call it. Fahrenheit 451, or 457, I forget the name. It's that dystopia. It's the failed utopias. And I think this game really nails that plastic world, that illusion. They nail it in the visuals. The sequel, I think the sequel is different. The sequel's kind of reflective. It's all glass and lens flares and kind of Gaussian blurs. The sequel looks beautiful, don't get me wrong. I love the aesthetic of that game, but I also think it's different. It's a very different kind of direction, isn't it? It's a much more... It's almost like looking at... The name of the game is the Edge of the Mirror, isn't it? It's Mirror's Edge. That game is really going whole hog on the idea of reflections and the mirror. And it looks beautiful. It looks phenomenal. I have not played it on PC. I'm probably going to check it out just to see how I feel about it, having coming off done this, just to go back there and refresh my brain. But to me, I think that the aesthetic in this game is just better. It's not as graphically as impressive, but they nailed something here that really appeals to me. And there's a few games that I absolutely adore the aesthetic on, when it comes to the colours and the theory and everything that's going on there, as we jump over the balcony here and we land on the train. So I have to be critical here, guys, because I think that this game is a beautiful, beautiful game with so many cool concepts and so much just really contrasting and awesome artwork and art design and art direction. I think of all the colours they could have gone with for the subway, this might be the safest and least interesting. Think about all these wonderful contrasts between white and these popping colours, these greens, these blues, these pinks, you know, and then down here we have a colour scheme that we have yet to see, which is this golden black that's going on, and it's undeniably striking and still pretty, but I think they missed a trick here. They could have bathed this in some different shades, they could have had gradations, they could have done a lot more than they did, but they kind of just went, you know, subway. And watch this too. This is weird. If you stay on the train there, instead of jumping towards that sign, you just kind of get grind into the top of that arch, and you don't die. But speaking of dying, I had to cap the frame rate here at 60 FPS to get through that door, because this game does not play well at high frame rates, and if you look online, people tell you do not increase the frame rate because weird things happen and shit stops working, and I can completely attest. The amount of times, guys, where weird stuff happened was off the chart. So just, it's not worth it. Just cap your frames and then get on with your life. I played the entire game uncapped because I you know, what's the point in playing PC if you play at fucking 60 FPS? It's disgusting to me. I'm not a speedrunner. I'm not trying to adhere to some rule set. I'm trying to play a game that doesn't kill my eyeballs. But that sequence there, she wouldn't hit the door. She collides on the tracks. For some reason, this game has a problem with its collision on these small beams on the ground. It's the same thing that happened in the building site, and it's to do with the frame rate. The frame rate does something to the collision, and it turns it into... you just can't do anything. She wouldn't jump, she wouldn't move forward, she wouldn't punch. It was super awkward. And I died like 5 times on that sequence, because she just wouldn't interact with the world the correct way. And I know that could happen on the console version, or on the lower frame version, but I can't remember. So if you've played it, guys, and you remember having problems with the collision in that sequence, please let me know, because I think that's just high frame rates. And this is one of the big issues when it comes to revisiting these old PC ports. You realise just how much PC got fucked. Because half the games, they don't work right. There's something really horrible about them, be it the mouse, be it the performance, be it the options. And it's really saddening, because, you know, the PC market is just as important as console, and these players are just as valuable as any other players. Why can't we give them a good experience? Instead, they just get fucked because they're on better hardware. It doesn't make any sense. But we were talking about base mechanics, and we were talking about how there's a lot of things in this game that slow you down for some reason. That right there is an interesting point. It's a springboard. Springboards in this game are any kind of object that's usually a box or some kind of ramp that will give you this speed boost and this glorified jump. And some of them are invisible. Some of them don't get shown on runner's vision, so you can kind of find them yourself and do what you want. And if you play the game a lot, you can find a lot of these cool areas, and you can manipulate the spring boost into giving you boosts you're not supposed to have, or way bigger boosts by adding in some other mechanics. I haven't talked too much about some of the other mechanics, purely from the fact of I didn't want to complicate the walkthrough until a bit later on. And there's so many things you can do in this game to kind of get away from the core design ruining the experience. And I mentioned earlier that for a game that is about speed and freedom, everything slows you down. Collision, combat sequences, constantly grappling or mantling, or not grabbing ledges, or not grabbing ledges in an expedient fashion. And one of the things that I felt when I first played the game, and I still feel it now, is I think that if they went back to the game and they looked at it, they would be able to understand that they really fucked up when it comes to running towards something that's just a little bit higher than you. In a lot of games, by the way, there's a transition here, guys, because I ended up going a crazy path and going somewhere where you weren't supposed to be. And when I ended up jumping off the building to kill myself so I could get better footage because it was wrong, it put me in a place that I'd never stared at or looked at, and I was over here. And then I climbed up this pipe, and this was the way it wanted me to go. So I just put a bit of a zoom there to show you that I couldn't sync the footage very well. It was quite disconcerting, so I just did a transition instead.
You're doing good. Mall's just a few blocks ahead.
But in a lot of modern games, and a lot of games now, when you jump towards something that's just a little bit taller than you, the game gives you this kind of bump. It gives you this grace period where you'll go up, even though if it was just 1-to-1, you'd have hit it and fell. And it's because we've realised that nobody wants to jump towards a platform, look like they're going to get on it or grab it, and then the character does neither of those things and they fall. This is a hallmark of platforming in older console games. You know, go back and watch my Uncharted videos where I complain about Nathan Drake not grabbing ledges. Go watch the Shadow of the Tomb Raider walkthrough I made where she fucking refused to grab ledges. There are so many instances where the game simply doesn't do what it's meant to do, and it's a frustrating experience. Move forward a handful of years, you don't see this as much. And I would have really liked this game to help you a bit more. And I think that's what the sequel does really well. I think all of the things I'm talking about here, the sequel probably does. It probably gives you a bit of a bump. It probably makes Faith make things she probably shouldn't make, whereas this one doesn't. And what it leads to, this is the game for the masters, you know? This is the game for the really, really dedicated person that wants to be punished. Whereas the sequel is the game for the players that aren't quite there yet. You know, when you qualify and graduate from the Mirror's Edge Academy, you go into Catalyst and you get comfortable with the systems. And then when you really feel like you're hot shit, you come back to this one and you see how good you are. It's the Guitar Hero 3 hit window and hit engine compared to Guitar Hero 2. The sequel is always, you know, more accessible. It's looser. It's more fun for the casual player. And ironically enough, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, it got a really weird reception to a lot of people saying that they'd not really done much and they'd not really, you know, took it where it needed to go. And I think in many ways, not many people realised just what they did and just how much better it was for people that weren't as good as other people at the game. And I think that that's super frustrating, that, because they went in there and cleaned up a ton of stuff to enable everybody to have a better time, and then everybody just went, well, all I did was run around and jump and that was it. But that's the game, you know. You wouldn't play a FIFA. Look at this room, dude. Look at the portraits on the wall contrasting with the black and the white here. And the green, that wonderful bright lime there coming through. What a beautiful game this is. Absolutely stunning. But that's the thing, isn't it? You wouldn't play FIFA and complain that there's too much football. That's what really pisses me off. And don't get me wrong, I do think that this game should be critiqued. I think there's plenty of things to critique. I think all games have plenty of things to critique. But if you're critiquing the game because it makes you platform and run around, you're fundamentally misunderstanding what it is. It's like those people that say there's only one way to do a room in Mirror's Edge. That's not true. And sure, some of it involves using mechanics the game doesn't teach you and coming up with all kinds of techniques to get around things, but there are still several paths that you can do if you're creative enough and if you're good enough. And that leads us to a lot of the tricks that people have come up with that kind of get around some of these limitations I'm talking about as we move into the mall here. I really don't like this part of the game. I think it's a very striking kind of like Bumblebee colour motif here with all the yellows and the blacks and the whites. But there's a decent amount of combat that you can skip if you choose to. I wanted to do the fight because I feel like it's much more difficult if you do so. And I kept in this elevator. You'll notice I've been editing out the elevators. This one I kept in because you get shot at and you can see the cracking effect on the glass. And I think this game has excellent cracking effect on the glass. It's only a texture, it's not dynamic, but it looks beautiful. And there we go, it shatters. That's the end of it, and now we can continue on. I get shot to shit as I come over here. But I've talked of a few things that slow you down in this game, and a couple of things that help you speed up. So the turning, the side jump into extra momentum so you can get a nice speedy start, and jumping up the stairs are really, really good. And manipulating springboards. Look, this is that thing that I mentioned. Sometimes you jump towards a springboard and you just get trapped in some physics. That happens all the time. You haven't seen it in this run, guys, because I've trimmed it out, or I just killed myself when it happened and I respawned. I killed myself in this game probably about 50 times because it simply didn't do what I told it to do, and it did something fucking stupid and made me sad. And I'm really trying to not just be like, the game is really frustrating and it's aggravating, because I love this game, I do. I love it, but I don't like playing it. It's mostly because I suck. But let's talk more about mechanics. So, you can run on walls in this game, as you all know, and you can jump off walls too and do some interesting things like this coming up here, where you run, turn around and then jump and do a nice little shortcut onto this awesome looking blue metal walkway. Well, also, when you run on a wall, you can attack, and you can do this kick move where you jump off a wall and you kick. This move is transformative in Mirror's Edge because it enables speedrunners to do incredible things. So, I don't think they understand why this works, but when you kick off a wall, at the end of the animation, the game puts a floor beneath you for 1 frame. A 1 frame floor beneath your character that enables you to do some pretty interesting things. I'm going to come down here, grab this guy's LMG, and I'm going to proceed to kill everybody in this room. But be very careful here, guys, because once you kill these 2 security guards over here, there's going to be a spawn of 4 people with armor. These guys kill you so fast, it's absurd. Like, I've literally been 2 to 5 hit framed to something that's absurd. I can't even put into words how silly it was. 2 of these guys shooting you at the same time, it's not going to end well for you. However, you can just simply come to the left here, jump up this, that I made a wonderful springboard detection right there. And then from here you can wall run and skip this entire sequence if you want to. You don't have to do it. But when you run on a wall and you kick, because after that animation it puts a floor underneath you, you can use that to survive falls that would usually kill you. And you can use it really creatively to get some places you're not supposed to be. And I've used it in this walkthrough so far, if you know what I'm talking about and if you're alert enough. I've used it a few times. I haven't used it in any kind of crazy way to do anything too specific, but it has been showcased in its uses. And then it leads you to the biggest part of speedrunning Mirror's Edge, which is the kick glitch. So, when you run on a wall and you press the melee button and you kick off the wall, when that floor is beneath you in that single frame, you can jump. You see the collision just then? I need to make this known, guys, because I'm going to try my best to tell you how awesome this game is. Like, look at the colours, fucking love it. This game has some of the worst detection and some of the worst collision I've ever experienced. And especially with the conflicts of high FPS, there are times when this game makes me want to die. Swiftly moving on. So when you kick off a wall, you have a 1-frame window to jump. And if you press jump at the right time, you will jump in mid-air, you'll get super range, and if you hit another wall, you'll run on it. So people can chain these kick glitches and then do crazy zigzags across the city that were never ever anticipated or intended. And it lets you do all kinds of amazing shortcuts that you will not see me do in this walkthrough. Mostly because it's hard as fuck. However, there's, oh look again, this weird physics thing. There's a caveat, right? So what these speedrunners have done to get around this timing being so precise and this trick being so technical is they've bound jump to scroll wheels. And if you have a free scrolling scroll wheel where you just flick it and it goes eternally until it stops, that puts in so many inputs really quickly that it's made this 1-frame jump, if you time it correctly, it's made it consistent. Still difficult, but way more consistent. So all the speedrunners, they bind jump to their scroll wheel, and at a certain part of the animation they roll the wheel and it does several inputs and they get that frame. They buffer that 1-frame window and they get those jumps. And they're so practiced at it, they do it every time. I don't have a mouse wheel like that unless I plug in an my old Logitech Proteus mouse. And it didn't really want to do that. So instead, I decided to try and land some of those jumps by timing it. And 1 frame is doable. It's doable, it's just very difficult. I'm not entirely certain I landed any of them. However, there's about 2 or 3 instances in this walkthrough where I think I might have, but I'm not sure. And they've already happened, 2 or 3 of them, I think. There's one coming up. So if you ever saw me, guys, run on the wall, kick off the wall, and then as I'm recovering, if I bounce forward a little bit in what looks like something that could be perceived as a jump, I may have done a kick glitch. And that is a 1-frame trick that I did by trying to time it. And to give you an idea, there was one sequence where I was at a checkpoint that was a good checkpoint, and I must have tried about 40 times, and I think I got it once. And I'm not even certain if I did. So it's tight. It's real tight, man. And speaking of tight, your asshole won't be tight after this room, because this room is terrible. This is a very easy room to skip if you want to just run and get through it, but if you want to fight it, you've got to be real careful. I can't even show you how fast you die here, because this looks easy. It looks like no one's shooting me, it looks like no one's doing anything, but if you can get to that first guy and disarm him, you've probably won. Getting to that first guy, you get team shot immediately and you die almost instantly. I don't remember Mirror's Edge being this difficult. Like, I died in about 1 second. I should probably make a video of me just getting murked in this room to give you an idea of just how disgusting it is. This is a very difficult room casually if you fight it, but if you run through it, it's not a problem at all. It's also one of the few rooms in the game that I'm not the biggest fan of. I think it's the corrugation. It's the corrugation and it's the blue on the boxes. I like the idea of grey, white and orange. I think that stuff can work really well. And I think it does work really well. But I just think in this particular lighting, I don't think it pops as much. But you need to get in that room across there and you have to jump to the side here. There was potentially a transition there where I ran around trying to look for some fancy stuff to do, but couldn't find anything too cool, so we just kind of got on with our lives. But let's talk a bit about more cool traversal things that you might not see in this run. So I've mentioned the kick glitch. If you watch a speedrun, you'll see the speedrunners do it all the time. They're very, very good at it. It's kind of crazy. Very, very tight. Very difficult to do on console. If you can kick glitch on console, you're a god, because there's no shortcuts. There's no like spamming. There's no specific way of doing it. You've got to time it, and good luck on that, 'cause it's hard. Same with the pipes. So you know the balance beams that I've kind of been lamenting in this playthrough? So when you jump onto those beams, you have a 1-frame window when you land to jump. And you can, if you're good enough, or a robot, you can jump over the pipes. Just bounce on them. 1 frame, 1 frame, 1 frame, 1 frame. But doing multiple 1-frame tricks in a row, very hard to do. Unless you bind the scroll wheel again, and then you can probably just spin that bad boy, get tons and tons of constant active open windows, and then boom, you do it. And then we get into this warehouse here where I get lost in this room, guys, because I don't really know a cool way of doing this. I'm assuming there's a really, really cool way of doing this, but I just climbed the boxes and felt like I'd not learned anything from playing the game. So if you're ever on a pipe, you can technically jump across them if you can land a bunch of one-frame tricks. Hard to do, but cool if you manage to nail it. And then another trick is parallel walls. You can infinitely wall run and jump on 2 parallel walls. I think that the timing gets a bit tricky the more you do it. I'd never tried to do it, I just saw somebody talking about it. So you can totally do that if you want to. There's a couple of instances where you can do some cool things with it, but you're not going to see it in this walkthrough. And then there's the use glitch, which is something I never managed to do, to give you an idea of how tricky some of this stuff is. So the use glitch is really interesting because it lets you cancel the use animation with movement. So if you were to turn a valve or press a button, if you press use twice on one frame, you can then cancel into a movement option. And earlier on you saw me go towards a valve and I slid and I didn't interact with it, and then I had to interact with it. That was one of the closest I think I came to doing it. Once again, I'm using a mechanical keyboard. I've got, you know, Cherry MX switches, very, very fast. It's the K70 Corsair Rapid Fire. It's known for its, you know, its precision and its speed at the time. And I tried to do it manually by just kind of mashing the key as I went towards it and then sliding. And I was never successful. You know, you've got to really practice that. But the idea behind it is that you can skip turning the valves and just go through. And I would have liked to have nailed one of those, but I wasn't going to spend, you know, a decent chunk of time getting it, because all it is an interactable. But it exists if you want to look into it. There's tons of videos on YouTube. I'm sure you can learn it much faster than I tried. But the idea is you press interact twice on the same frame, and then you can use a piece of movement to cancel out of the animation, so feel free to do that. And that's the use glitch. Comes in handy in the speedrun, might not come in handy casually, but it's cool to know, you know, it's fascinating to know these different movement things that people are doing. And other than that, I mean, there's lots of other ones. There's actually a bit of a video, a glossary of all the tricks that are used in speedrunning, and there's dozens of them. There's these, and they've got weird names and they've got fun stuff, and I recommend you checking them out, 'cause I saw them once again on my little Mirror's Edge hole that I fell through. And I think it's fascinating that people find that stuff and all the cool things they come up with, like coiling on the barbed wire to be able to jump on it, and all kinds of interesting sequence breaks and shortcuts. And there's a couple of ones where they like hit a wall at certain angles and it just flies. They just go flying. You know the speedrunner stuff that you see. Ooh, this room's cool. If you come in here as well, it really blasts out the contrast. It's like the white balance goes through the roof, and it really emphasizes the white and the red here. And we're moving into the first encounter with these guys. So these guys suck. There's some kind of specialized runners, and they chase you down and they beat you up and they tase you. And in this first sequence here, you can kind of just use all these wonderful springboards to get around this section and then just kind of ignore them. But from this moment onwards, you're going to be bumping into those. I got stuck on something here. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, I don't even know what happened. The amount of times you just kind of get stuck on weird stuff, pretty sad. But that guy kicks down that door. We're just going to come this way, jump across this gap, and we kept the momentum and we kept our footing, but I lost it, so I jump across this one. Their pathing on some of the more complicated geometry is not where it needs to be, so you can totally utilize that. But you'd be surprised how capable these guys are when you get out into the open world. I love this area, dude. The blue trim into the blue elevator with the silvers. Just absolutely conceptually delightful. And we left a rare elevator in there for you to enjoy. That's the stuff I've been removing, because there's so many of them. I think it's a victim of the loading. I think it's the same with the valves. The game came out on 360 at a time where, you know, optimization on loading probably wasn't quite there, and in many ways there's a lot of ambitious stuff in this, and it's DICE doing DICE things, and we all know DICE work in mysterious ways. So I think all of that stuff is just loading. It's an excuse to load. And that's the type of thing that when you go back and maybe play it on backwards compatibility, it might be a little bit better. But I don't know if it's just kind of like hard baked into the game.
Up ahead of you. Could be a way out.
Maybe if you play it on SSD, it's a little bit quicker. Also, be careful here because you're going to be pursued by these incredibly gymnastic dickheads.
You get direct.
But have you ever played a game, guys? Oh wow, there's me getting tased. Have you ever played a game that you love, but you don't much like playing it? And I think that sounds like such a strange thing, doesn't it? But I'm certain that other people will have this feeling for things. A game that you want to like more than you do. Because Mirror's Edge is that for me. I love this start of this level, by the way. The blue on that, sorry, the green on that boat with the contrasting dark blues here, like this midnight blue. So good. Absolutely beautiful. Because when I think about playing Mirror's Edge, it's exciting because I think of the colours and I think of the movement and I think of all these things. All these facets of it that I really enjoy. And then I play it and then I remember all the shortcomings and I'm not very good at the game and rusty and I'm not, you know, warmed up and sharp and know all the stuff. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because in your brain, it's like the coolest thing. It must be the YouTube effect of, you know, when you watch somebody play something on YouTube and it makes you want to play it, and then you download it or you install it or whatever, and then you jump on it, and then within 20 minutes you're kind of done because you remember all the reasons why you stopped playing it. And speaking of reasons to stop playing, this is a combat sequence. You might be able to skip this by just doing some movement and knowing exactly where to go, but I'm just going to steal the G36 off that guy and then continue moving. I've got to talk about the combat, I guess, and now is as good a moment as any. So I've already mentioned to you guys that the mouse feels terrible in this game. It's absolutely horrendous. Probably the worst feeling mouse I've ever felt. Just touching the mouse is hilarious. And I didn't want to do too much to it because I made sure that the smoothing was off and whatnot. I went into the config to make everything as I could. I converted my sensitivity to give me a bit of a chance, but it never feels good, precise, or fun. It just feels awkward. And then the shooting itself is really weird too. Considering that this team made Battlefield, I say this team, you know, this company, it might not necessarily be the same people, but like you put the dot on people, you can't ADS. You put the dot on people and nothing happens. And there's this slow motion technique that you can use, but it's so slow, it doesn't really help unless you're super close, because at a range the guns just don't feel good. And everything about it, the feel, the animations, the impact, it's off. All of it is off. You can tell that they really didn't want combat to be a thing, but then for some reason they caved. And I wish they'd have stuck to the guns and made it so that this wasn't in the game. And I don't think, you know, you can get through an entire game without any combat, but they could have made it so that it suits Mirror's Edge. I wouldn't have minded, like that boss fight, a couple of Dragon's Quest kind of, or Dragon's Lair, sorry, not Dragon's Quest, where you're playing the game and every so often you have to press a button and it's essentially a glorified checkpoint, a glorified QuickTime event. But you could have masked it in just the wonderful visuals of the game and got on with your life. And there are times where, you know, the fighting, there's some ideas with the fighting that could have been good. They're just not. And there's so many odd choices too, like weird animations, weird factors. There's this vacuum and this gravitational pull that happens when you get close to people, where the camera focuses on them, and when you want to run away, Faith just auto-corrects and stares at the enemy, so it makes it really hard to go places. Oh, by the way, these doorways, they have weird collision on them as well, so you can get stuck if you're not careful. But like the whole thing is just grossly unsatisfying. And in 2008, we've had some really good shooters. There's no excuse for this. It's just subpar and unacceptable. And then the counter-argument you could say, which I've seen some people mention this, is this idea that Faith is not a soldier. Faith is not a soldier, so she shouldn't be able to be really, really good at shooting people, right? What would that be? That wouldn't make any sense. Shit's just dumb. Here we go, we got some loading valves. Everybody's favourite. I've kept these in here, guys, so you can see the contrast. We're going to remove some of these later on because they're essentially just loading barriers. And then you come into here, which I think is another loading barrier. They were doing everything they could here to mask loading, and it just kind of comes across as rote and uninspired. That was weird, wasn't it? What if that was a frame rate thing just then? Because I'm curious too. I wonder if certain things happen in this game because of the high frame rate, and I'm wondering if the AI kills you quicker because of the frame rate. Because I remember beating this game a bunch on console, and I don't remember dying as fast as I died when I was trying to get through that room that I mentioned that was just a complete awful design. So it makes me wonder, maybe they're a bit more accurate, maybe they're a bit more aggressive, I don't know what it is, but it just felt like they laser beamed me every time I ran in that room. And I watched a couple of playthroughs on YouTube to see if anybody else had had a similar experience, and some people had some rough times, but not like that. I overshoot this by a little margin. I do love that background though here. You see that stripy line and that gradient of green. And speaking of, so there you go. There's a good example of a moment where you think I would grab a ledge and I don't. That's the type of thing that I could have trimmed out. And then again, didn't grab the pipe. See that? Ran all the way up the wall next to the pipe, didn't grab the pipe. And you can say here, guys, I wasn't lined up correctly to the... I just don't know. This room is probably the greatest statement as to why I find this game very tedious. And sure, I 100% can admit that my fault is in here too. But you'd think, wouldn't you, with how the game is meant to work and how it's meant to respond, that the detection on some of this stuff would be stronger. But it just, at times, it feels horrible. But there is some human error too. You can't blame the game for all of it. I just think that that's the kind of situation. How many games have you swung on bars, guys? You know, you're thinking about your Prince of Persias, your God of Wars, your bloody Marios and stuff. Like, there's been so many games where you swing on pipes, and you come to this game and you can't even swing on a basic pipe. It doesn't calculate in your brain. It's very, very jarring. This is one of the parts of the game where it goes very puzzle-solvy. And I don't mind it. I think it's one of the areas the game could have gone to, but I think as far as the areas they could have chose, you'll have to tell me in the comments, fellas. What do you think? To me, Mirror's Edge is all about the cityscape. It's all about the navigating the roofs. That feeling of freedom. That feeling of being on the knife's edge. These interior areas like this, as much as they're good for pacing and they're good for diversity, I never felt like here the movement and the platforming was anywhere near as intuitive and as fun as it is when you're doing the roof-to-roof action. That was an edit on the door, by the way. See the difference? Can you imagine if that's what the door was? Watch this. Look at that. Look how nice that is. Was it really so hard, DICE, to put massive fucking loading zones behind all these doors, apparently? The green here is beautiful as well. What a beautiful looking green. And that was a better mantle just then too, and I get stuck on top of the door here. That's the type of stuff I'm talking about, you know. You get into the movement, you try and do something, and you get punished massively for doing it. And then when we come out here, we get our first sequence with a sniper. So this is really interesting, this. I think of all the combat sequences, this is kind of the one you expect to work the most. Because you're moving cover to cover, using mobility, and there is a sniper shooting at you, and they're not constantly hitting you the whole time like some of the other sequences. But it's kind of funny, this, because there's a couple of ways you can do this that I found out later on, after I'd recorded it, where you can just run across one of the left-hand sides and then jump across and get on the platform with the person. My path here is nowhere near as optimal as it could be. I was just kind of messing around. And then for the most, you're in almost no danger on normal difficulty from being shot that much by this sniper, and it's not that punishing when you do. If you're on hard, this might be a bit more grueling. And there's interesting cityscape there to stare at. You can see that the quality of the assets in the background are very different. It's almost like a Jetson city with the detailing. And it's good for its purpose. She can't shoot you, I don't think, through the fence there, so you've got a bit of immunity. And boom, she just shoots me as I'm landing. And now I'm gonna... Do you see the twinkling then through the geometry? That's kind of interesting. I think that's how the camera works, that. You see that in a bunch of games. Instead of those light beams being in the distance where they're meant to look like they are, they're actually in the foreground so you can see them on the camera. But they're placed so that they look like that they're much more further away than they are, when in reality they're not, because they shine in front of geometry. They must have some kind of transparency thing going on, where they shine through everything. And it looks kind of weird, but I do quite like that. And for some reason here, the boss character can see you, but they can't shoot you there, which is odd. This whole bit's been a bit ham-fisted. I feel like that's kind of a good metaphor for the end of the game, isn't it? Start of the game, rooftops, movement, still alive, great music, you know. The aesthetic is wonderful, the whites, the colours, and then gradually over time more combat's introduced, and then you come to areas like this where a lot of the platforming is just jumping on these weird like air conditioning things and jumping over some barriers and whatnot, and then you have to do some awkward fighting, and here is the first of our awkward fighting. So this enemy is kind of simple, but I'm going to make it look hard because the combat in this game is just tedious. And the idea here is, I think if you hit her 5 times, you can then disarm her. And you can do some interesting combos with hitting high, crouching, hitting low, hitting high, so on and so forth. And then I get weirdly grabbed then and I can't move. You can also just frame advantage her when she comes in, hit her once, but if you hit her multiple times, she grabs you and does a counter attack. So try to go for the one hit, back out, go for a second hit, and this whole thing is just messy as fuck. I should have recorded this again and done a much cleaner fight, but truth be told, I hate the combat so much in this, I just didn't really care. And there it is, when she turns around like that, her gun glows red, and I really like that because it's subtle enough that you can miss it, but it's obvious enough that you understand what you're supposed to do. So the next time she falls back, you go up to her and you disarm and you take the gun off her. And then she runs away and you get to chase her down, and then the next fight that we have is hopefully going to be a bit cleaner than that one. But that's one of those situations where once you learn the mannerisms, you can probably stomp her really quickly. And then we've got more doors because loading's fun. But I love the presentation of this game. I really do. Oh, I don't love this. And then I get stuck here because she won't let go. And I'm pressing everything on the keyboard and I'm kind of like weirdly stuck. I'm pressing to go down and she's just having none of it. But do you see that? Like, why the fuck can you grab that? Why is that grabbable? I just don't get it. That's one of those moments that you're having tons of fun in Mirror's Edge, you're smiling, you're kicking ass, the game is amazing, and then you grab that fucking door and it won't let you off it, and then you're pissed off and you turn the game off. It's just, that's how quick you can swing in this game if you're me. And it's a personal thing, definitely. There's probably people that play this game every day and love it and never ever get frustrated, but my god, dude, does this game annoy me. This is the most annoying game I've ever played, and it's just for little things. It's the little things that impede it from being as good as it could be. And I still think it's a great game, and I still think it's worth playing, and I still think that there are a lot of people that were way too harsh on it, and I can understand why they were, because it's one of those games, isn't it? When it starts going wrong, it feels so brutal because it's exposing just some of these gaps in this system that could have been so much stronger. But what is here is still so superb, so I can't help but want to cherish it and want to celebrate it and share it as we slide down here. But even the music, I think the music, they nailed the presentation with the music. The music fits the visuals and fits the theme and the time and the game. You know, the combat's a miss, and I think the story's a miss too, but environmentally, the game is superb. Stylistically, it's superb. And the idea back in this day of a first-person movement-based game, I don't know how many of those games were around at that point, but they definitely did something different, and they brought something to the forefront, which I think is quite cool. But we fight this chick again. I'm just going to dodge her move and punch her. I'm going to whiff a few of these punches because you don't get too much of a lunge unless you get really in there. It's just kind of awkward, and they did improve the combat in the sequel. Although doing the movement off the wall and kicking people in the sequel is really powerful. So all you really need to do is bait people to the wall and then you fuck them up. But they could have been tempted to completely stop the combat in its entirety, couldn't they? They could have just removed it all because it did not get good reviews on the combat front, and for obvious reasons. But I think, watch this. That pissed me off. Why didn't I just roll under that? Why is the combat roll so garbage? It makes me so mad. I can't imagine a move that the developers want you to do, and it slows you down and gives you no good mobility. Is there some trick I'm missing there with the roll where you do something and you kind of slide out of it at the end of it? Ooh, this is a pain in the ass too. See that nice collision on the ramp there? Getting completely stuck on fucking everything. Welcome to Mirror's Edge. Is he going to tase me? No, he's going to punch me, little git. That guy punches me. This is one of those moments where I do like this sequence and I like this level because I think that the colours again really popping with the light blue and then the dark blue and the yellow in the distance and everything coming together on this wonderful canvas of white. And there's some There's lots of opportunity here for freedom and creativity when it comes to how you navigate this zone, which I really like too. But the problem is you're being chased by two guys that can tase you, and if they do tase you, it just gets really, really ugly really quickly. And that was a slow mantle right there, so I get super punished. There's the springboard to get up here, and I think there's a crash mat to my left that I've got to jump onto. Another slow mantle, absolutely brilliant. I'm getting tased for it, look at that. Oh, tase me again, mid-air, what a bitch. Mid-air jump, get tased. And if you're lucky here, you can do all this platforming, and if you're a bit better and a bit faster, you can do it without those guys getting into a position to tase you, but I wasn't fortunate enough. And this is coming back into the idea of playing the game twice. Look at that orange though, what a pop. Beautiful colours. If I'd have come back to this game, guys, and I'd have forgiven all of its sins and I'd have got past all of the extra... See that just then? Me landing on that roof was faster than rolling because I landed and kept all my momentum, whereas when you roll it kills your momentum, so why would you ever want to do it? It's just so bizarre to me. Imagine doing developer-intended techniques that are meant to be skillful applications and being punished for it. That's literally this game. And it makes no sense. There are a few things as frustrating as well as trying to run around a platformer while you're constantly being slowed down and attacked by dickheads. This is really the moment in the playtest where I wish the testers had said, the idea here is real good. Instead of the combat's not good. The combat's really miserable. It just kind of ruins the game. It ruins what it stands for. Instead of going towards this combat and this horrible gunplay and this horrible melee system, just tweak the detection. Tweak the pipe detection, tweak the mantle detection, make it so that we can mantle things and do so skillfully. Make it so that when you do a commando roll, you don't lose all momentum. Take away this illusion of realism. Because when you think of freerunners, when they roll after a landing, they're taking all of that kinetic energy, and instead of dispersing it through their feet and like jacking their knees and everything, they're moving with it, they're transferring it, and all of that force then gets kind of like deflected, doesn't it? And it goes into the roll, and from that they've got some serious momentum, some serious speed, and then they might even stagger forward and continue. Like, that's what Faith should do. When she comes out of that roll, you should be moving faster than you were when you went into it. But it just makes no sense that she just stops. And it just, I don't know, man. There's so many things like that where it just seems to be very counterintuitive. It's like when you're running. When you run straight forward in this game, you keep maximum speed. If you turn too sharply, or you turn left or right, or press left or right and strafe, you lose all your speed. It really neutralizes your ability to speed up. And there's a mechanic in this game, which is known as, I think they call it something like wall speed, or wall kicks or something. And the idea is when you jump up on a wall and jump off it quickly, you get a big speed boost because jumping in this game is good for speed. Which is interesting. You're faster when you're jumping than you are when you're running, which I just find to be odd. So what the speedrunners do is, once again with their mouse bound on the scroll wheel, they'll run really close to a wall on an angle, and they'll mash jump, and they'll be jumping into the wall and jumping off it, and they'll be getting this really big speed boost. And I think the maximum speed of Faith when she starts sprinting and she gets up to those lines on the screen, I think it's 26 mile per hour. 26 to 30 mile per hour, something like that. But when you jump off a wall, you can go up to 40, higher. So when you chain those, you can get a huge amount of speed. And that's what they do. The speedrunners at all times are finding these walls to do these wall boosts from, and it's really, really cool that they've managed to navigate a path through the game to use all of this to come together to give themselves absurd speed. And you'll notice that they're always doing jumping on the straights, and then they're always using these animations to cancel into the side jumps that let them get the extra speed. All kinds of cool things that they've come up with to get around things that should not exist. Speed penalties for playing the game. Like, it's like, just then, you should be penalised for fucking up a landing. There's no two words about that. You know, if you don't land the landing, you should not get rewarded. You should be punished. But you shouldn't be punished if you do the skillful landing. Like, you were almost as slow from doing a commando roll than you are from falling and like hurting your knees. Oh, this is another instance of pipe detection. Hashtag pipe detection, always cool. But you know something that I find really interesting about the game? Considering it's a platformer, the one thing that is almost absent through the whole thing is environmental hazards. Have you noticed that?
Try going for the engine.
Of course, they have the steam, and if you drop off the roofs, you will die.
Patch you into the CPF.
But for whatever reason, they didn't go towards the idea of learning to navigate the environment quickly while moving at speed. You know, there's no judgment calls of being like, oh, that's a walkway I can run on, that's something I could jump and springboard off, that's something that I have to jump over because if I land on it, it'll break and I'll fall through the roof and land in the warehouse or something. Like, there's no moments of you having to gauge the quality of the surface that you're standing on or you're jumping to. And there's no moments where there's this fire or electricity or something. The hazards of the game are entirely done and serviced by soldiers and helicopters. And I think they missed a trick with that too. You know, they could have done skylights, which give you a really, really cool speed boost if you jump off them correctly, but if you spend too much time on them, they break. You know, there could have been glass and different types of glass. I don't think any of this is all that complicated either. It could have been explained to the character quite subtly, and then you just learn by doing. You learn what surfaces to run on, what not to run on. There could have even been better surfaces to run on for speed. So surfaces that slow you down, surfaces that speed you up, and it doesn't have to be huge, but it can be the difference between somebody who plays a racing game and spends most of their time swerving off into the grass, as opposed to the guy that's got the perfect line and uses the slipstream and everything. You know, the difference between the novice and the intermediate player could have been much more noticeable, and I wonder if that was ever on the cards. Because if you look at the early prototype for Mirror's Edge, this is a big combat sequence by the way, and it's fucking miserable. So just use the shotgun, use the gun that you pick up and kill people, and just try and be as safe as you possibly can, because it's the shooting in this game, hands down, some of the worst shooting I've ever felt. Beautiful. Just, it's a sheer achievement to make shooting this lame, and they nailed it. But the early prototype for Mirror's Edge, it had footage of a character jumping in slow motion off buildings and shooting with a pistol with one hand. And I think that kind of puzzle shooting could have been really good. It's not going to, win any massive awards for originality, because Call of Duty's been doing that in sequences after cutscenes for a long time. But just, can you imagine if the combat was more of a case of on-rails moments and puzzle moments than this, whatever this is that you're watching right now? And I think that would have really led into the idea of the levels being lines, and these optimized smooth lines that are all about iterative improvements and understanding. Because you could have made it so that, you're doing a wall run, and during a wall run there might be two guys to the right and the camera pans to the right, and then you can activate that slow motion time, or it's even activated for you, and in that moment you have to shoot them both. But it feels good and it's not, completely jarring and awkward. That could have worked. Little moments of, run and gun and popping up and whatnot. It could have been a little bit like Time Crisis. Just turn it into a rail shooter for a few moments every so often. They could have had some traversal, and then there'd be people on the roofs. And as you're moving, depending on how fast you are, depends on how expedient you can be with the enemies. And it's just about finding that speedy line so that you can get to them quickly, kick them, and keep moving. And if you do it correctly, you keep the speed and you chain it all, and maybe you even get one of their guns to lead up to one of those sequences where you do the shooting. This is interesting, by the way. So you turn this valve and you can hide in that underground area, or you can go up into the roof bit. And in the roof bit, it's like you're taking damage, but you don't die. I thought this was quite weird. Like, look at this. You're like, ugh, ugh, ugh. It's all odd. And then that's the end of it. And then you come down here, and this looks awesome, this sequence. The smoke in this game looks really nice. I was kind of surprised. You don't see too much of that, but once again, environmental hazards. They could have done this. They could have used smoke, used a burning building. And then we have a huge combat sequence, which is fucking appalling. So disarm the first guy, shoot him, then come and disarm this guy, get his gun, and then go and kill the last guy. This is a guy on a balcony. And then once you kill the guy on the balcony, you get the G36. Oh no, sorry, I shot him. So pick up the G36, and then when you come over here, you can kill the guy with the LMG. And then if you go and grab his LMG, everyone else is going to die because it's the best weapon in the game. So murk that guy, pick his gun up, and then clean everybody up. What a waste of time this is. What a waste of a game. It's so strange that they started shoehorning this shit in. And have you noticed? It's always orange. Always orange when they're doing this stuff. It's almost like they know they're committing a crime. Terrible. But If anybody's played Sunset Overdrive or The Club or any of those games where they've got scoring in them, those games are shooters, but they're more like Tony Hawk's because it's all about the line and the framing and how you do things, and I love the architecture in this building. The Shard is one of the best parts of the game, just purely based on the visual perspective. The angles here that they cut with the beams, and oh my gosh, I love the white planters and I love the red sofas for the contrast. This is a massive combat puzzle though. You come in this room, you want to disarm the guy with the LMG, and then you want to kill everybody and just be as safe as you can, because this is a really, really big fight. It's pretty much one of the last fights before the end of the game. And it's so fucking needless and goes against everything you've been doing. It makes me wonder why it's here. And it makes me sad too, because Sleeping Dogs is a game that doesn't get enough credit, because it's essentially a Western homage to Yakuza. And it's a really fun, like, Yakuza clone, GTA-esque experience. And that game does one thing better than almost anything else, and almost any other game I've played. When you get a gun in Sleeping Dogs, it feels powerful. Because most of the game is spent wrestling. You grab people, you take them up to some kind of object in the world, you smash them into it. It's very satisfying. You do fist and kicking, lots of hand-to-hand combat. And then every so often, you pick up a gun and you become the destroyer of worlds. People die, it feels very powerful, it feels like you're cheating. And I love that. I love the power fantasy and the force multiplier of you picking a weapon up and it having this huge effect. In most games, you find a weapon within 10 minutes, then there's a million more weapons to come, the whole game is weapons, and the weapons just become an extension of your arm because you're always using them, and you don't really see them anymore. They just become a delivery system of the next part of the game. In Sleeping Dogs, it's not like that, because they only show up so often, and when they do, they have this effect on you as a player, which I think is really clever. I think this game could have done with that. Can you imagine if you'd have spent this whole game running away from people, or chasing people, or environmental hazards? You'd never shot a gun, you'd never kicked a man, you'd never done any of that stuff. You'd just done parkour, running, awesome platforming traversal puzzles. And then on this final sequence, you get a light machine gun, and the shooting is awesome. Everyone's getting like split apart, torn apart by how high caliber the gun is and how dangerous it is. All the environment is being destructible and ridiculous, and you're just cruising through like a juggernaut, destroying everything, and it felt amazing, and it was this wonderful, awesome cherry on top of this rather elaborate drink that you've been enjoying. It would have been so amazing to have just this tease of, oh my goodness, look at this. I'd play a whole game that was like this. I wish there was more of this. You don't have anybody saying, I wish there was more of this when it comes to Mirror's Edge's combat, because there will be people who like it, because there's people that like eating their own shit, but fundamentally most people are going to come away from this game thinking, why the hell was that in the game? Why did they put any time into this when it's clearly nowhere near the focus or nowhere near what the game was meant to be? But can you imagine the responses if they'd have done that sequence and done it right? It would have been so interesting. And then they could have even done DLC. You know, depending on the return there, depending on what was going on, they could have done super combat focused additional sections. They could have repurposed areas in the game and added the guns and things. It would have not been that difficult to do, and people would have been happy and it would have been fine. But instead, the game just leans harder and harder and harder on it the further you go. Oh, this is something I have to talk about. So I can't move in this vent. It will not let me move. This is what happens when you play on high FPS on old games. So I went into RivaTuner, see in the top left, I capped my frames at 60 FPS, and it let me go. And this is me alt-tabbing out of the game, turning off the frame rate limit, and then moving on. And ironically enough, the other side of this, I get stuck again, but it lets me through. This is the thing you don't realise, guys, when you play on console, when you play on PC but you don't change anything. If you're one of those people that loves PCs and been a PC gamer for forever, and you play everything at 60 FPS, you don't understand these kind of things. Games break down when you try to play them in a more impressive variation, you know, than the developers perhaps intended or ever thought would happen, which to me is fucking stupid. The idea that they never expected people to push the frame rate on a PC game that's now 13 years old is just absurd. Like, this game should run like a goddamn dream. And I definitely feel like, because I'm playing it at a higher FPS, that the game is easier because you're seeing a lot more of the world, your inputs are coming out a bit more precisely, and I think a lot of the teething issues that were originally present in the game, especially on console, came from the fact that the hardware just wasn't really powerful enough to do it. I get stuck here as well. This was I screamed on this part when I was recording it, because I got stuck trying to jump over the railing here. You know how I mentioned that this game aggravates me almost more than any other game I've ever played? It's because of moments like this. When you pick guns up in this game, do you know what happens? You become really, really slow. Strange that, isn't it? You know, this game about speed, about mobility, about traversal, parkour, freedom. You pick a gun up, you turn into a fucking Abrams tank. And it's really frustrating. And they've done it to disincentivize picking guns up, which I think is hilarious because... Look at that, by the way. It's a nice physics bug. That was sick. Think about what the game has done. The game has done everything it can to stop you using the very thing you played the game to use, which is movement. And instead, they force you into these shooting galleries that don't fit the game and should never have existed. And not only have they done that, but they're punishing you for forcing this playstyle on you. And I say forcing this playstyle on you. Speedrunners have figured out if you rush a certain part of this map quite quickly, you can trigger a texture to end this sequence without shooting. So you can skip this entire room if you're interested. I didn't think of doing something like that because I didn't watch any of those videos before I did this walkthrough. I didn't want them to encroach upon my strategies and making this video a reflection of myself. This is the pipe, by the way. If you can press the jump on one frame of landing on that pipe, you'll jump again, and you'll notice just there I tried to do it and I failed spectacularly. Not to worry. But see that just then, that's a great example, I think, of the idea of Mirror's Edge and the reality. I boosted, I ran to that edge, I jumped across that gap, I had the speed lines telling you that I'm at really, really good speed, and instead of landing and feeling amazing, this looks amazing, by the way, look at that. Look at the lines, they're like the pyramid there of the squares, the oblique angles, absolutely phenomenal. This room is beautiful. This is also the final room of the game, the final sequence. It's a huge combat sequence and it's terrible. But looking at that jump just then, guys, did you think I was going to make it? I did. And you know, the moment I had to mantle, I felt like a failure. And I think that this is a really important thing. It's how I see Mirror's Edge and how Mirror's Edge sees itself. In this game, you're not meant to land on everything perfectly, keep your momentum and keep running. You're not. It's not how the game was designed. That's why everything slows you down and everything stops you and everything feels clunky and the mantling is just fucking animation obsessed and really slow. You're meant to feel a connection to the world. And I have to give them props because they committed to that. They committed to the idea of feeling like you are this vulnerable freerunner landing on these surfaces and doing these crazy jumps. And what it reminds me of Skate. Do you remember Tony Hawk? If you got good at Tony Hawk, you could go up a ramp, you could do 9,000 tricks chained together, manuals, reverts, kickflips, holds, all kinds of stuff, right? And do a combo of 1,000,000 gazillion points. But none of it meant anything because you became so desensitized to the difficulty of what you were doing that you would go up a ramp and do 50 kickflips in one air. So you were doing this absurd ballet of impossible, like, gravity-defying nonsense, and it was really fun and really skillful and really awesome. But it didn't mean anything because it lost the value of what you were doing. You have to shoot the servers here, and you only have to shoot one of them from each of the rows, but I kind of went in here shooting all kinds of stuff, and it's not what they want you to do. So just shoot each of them once till they blacken, and she'll say that you've destroyed all the servers. And then you played Skate, and you couldn't even do a fucking ollie. Doing an ollie in Skate, or a kickflip, and landing it, is not easy to do, because the execution on it is way harder, the skill ceiling is way higher, and it's way more punishing than Tony Hawk. So if you do, like, a varial heel flip into a grind, and then you land that, it's the most satisfying thing in the world, because it feels like you did this impressive thing. You could do that in one attempt in 5 seconds on Tony Hawk's every time. In Skate, that could take you hours, because it's so much more difficult on the execution. So I think Mirror's Edge is a lot similar to that. They wanted the jumping and the movement to be quite pedantic in its difficulty, to make it feel like everything you were doing was impactful. I love this room, by the way, the gold and the black. Look at the contrast of the floor here and the gloss on the paint. It just looks phenomenal. What a beautiful area. And all this is like a maintenance tunnel, but they nailed it. And then the blue coming up here, the midnight blue of the sky. So Mirror's Edge is the Skate of first-person movement games. And then all you need to do now is slow down time, jump here and kick this guy, and that's the end of the walkthrough. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and you take care now.
I have changed, just like you.